Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Shane, for that kind introduction. Thank you very much to AVIA, the organisers, Akamai, and to our sponsors today for inviting me along, and my distinguished fellow speakers. I really enjoyed that first session from Sunil. I hope wherever you're watching this from that you and your families are healthy and well. My name's Steve. I'm the Regional Director for Parrot. I have 20 years experience in TV, content, production, distribution, video consulting practices, and I now lead Parrot's efforts here from sunny Sydney. So who are Parrot? Well, we're a team of data scientists and TV industry experts with a pure mission to help connect content with paying consumers. You'll find lots of sessions today on the issues of security, the depth and details of piracy in the region, and innovation in content protection. So I'm going to let the experts deal with those, and I'm looking forward to listening to them. What I wanted to do today was show you how we at Parrot look at this world and how we take billions of audience engagement signals, including hundreds of millions of instances of consumption, what you all call piracy, daily, and actually try to use that information to help the industry fight back against piracy, but in a different way, in a positive way, by connecting more of their content to legal, sometimes hopefully converted consumers. So yes, there is data in this presentation, but my job is to try and make it as simple and as business focused as possible. So we're going to discuss how we collect, analyze, and apply demand data, including piracy data. And then we're going to importantly look at why do we track consumption piracy data, and what can media companies learn and action from this data set amidst the pain of piracy. So our thesis at Parrot Analytics is that we live in an attention economy. Now, the fact that all you people have decided to give me your attention for 20 minutes, I'm very grateful for, because your attention could be on so many other things. And it's the same in the television world. Our favorite show can be on any platform, in any country, at any time. And it's very difficult to really find out and measure and understand how people are using content nowadays. So we're all about leading indicators, not historical lagging indicators like the rating systems that have been the same for about 50 odd years, and also audience panels and things like that. We're much more about empirical information. We gather billions of data signals every day, and our accuracy is in our volume. And we aim to make sense of that attention economy so that our clients and the world can understand more about their business objectives. So let me explain how we do this very briefly. Say you're in Singapore and you see a out-of-home advert for Loki, the new show on Disney+. The first thing you do is you jump into the digital world where we spend about 15 hours of our day. Now, these are the ways that you engage with that content. First of all, you might research the content. So you might heavily jump into Wikipedia, IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes to really understand about the characters of the content, when the show's on, and the relation in the Marvel universe. Then you might go into your social networks. You might discuss it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr to really understand about the show and talk to your friends about it and uncover secrets about it. Then you might jump onto the tube sites, YouTube, Dailymotion, Twitch, Vimeo, to really watch clips, content, trailers, previews. And then importantly, you might choose to pirate that content if you haven't got access to it. Now, as soon as a file name for Loki episode 1 went up on a search engine for a piracy network, we took a copy of that file name and we were able to track to see how many people were pirating that file around the world. Now, we don't do that for enforcement. It's very important for me to say that. We do that to help the industry make sense of what's going on so they can actually use that negative information in a more positive manner. So all of that together we call the demand for content. So whenever you hear me say demand in this presentation, I mean an aggregate of all those signals together. And what you as an industry do is you monetize that. So you monetize that demand, whether it's on AVOD, SVOD, linear TV, or pay TV. The point of it is content demand is very platform agnostic, whereas the monetization is very platform specific. So let's get into it. Why do it? So here's how we can use that piracy data and the other data that we collect. First of all, we can look at share of global demand for programming. So this was just after the Netflix results came out in Q1 this year. We essentially look at the demand overall for original programming. So you can see here that Netflix in Q1 2020 had about 50, 58, 59%, and it's been reduced now to just under 50%. Now, Netflix said that this is due to the pandemic, and we at Parrot absolutely agree. The pandemic has led to some extraordinary results and subscriber numbers in the last 12 months. But we also see something else. We see the share of demand for original programming starting to shift. We see other companies starting to catch up, and you can see what I'm talking about on this chart here. Disney Plus is a key example here. You can see the Mandalorian launch in 2020 Q1. That was a big initial blast. Then you can see maybe the kids' installation content maybe start to dwindle slightly as the Mandalorian was the only true original to watch. Then you saw Hamilton launch in Q3 and Q4. And then, of course, the Marvel machine has fully kicked into gear in Q1. So important to understand that our data almost maps one-to-one from content demand to number of subscribers on a service. Because not every TV show or platform is created equal. I don't know whether the AV team can make that slide a bit bigger for you. Thank you. So we grade our shows average, good, outstanding, and exceptional. And about 64% of our 17,000 shows that we track sit in the average category. So that's quite a lot. It takes 0.2% to break through to exceptional. So what you can see from here, when you put the demand of all the shows together using all our signals, that Netflix do have a hell of a lot of new shows, but the bang per buck is probably playing out better for HBO Max and potentially Stars and Apple. You actually have to have more hits to have a breakout, as what we're seeing with some of these companies. So it really is looking at demand per dollar. And you can see some companies are really being able to become hit machines, which is terrific. Next slide, if we could. Thank you. So one of the things we're using our piracy and other data for is to understand binge or weekly drop. There's a big focus on this in the industry at the moment. We've actually seen a turning point in 2019 for streamers moving away from the binge model slightly. This was the first time that demand for weekly release originals has started to exceed the supply. And since then, you can see from the orange lines here that the number of digital originals released on a weekly schedule has increased, but not as fast as the demand for these shows has increased. So people are coming back to the thought that they want to talk about a show throughout the week before the next episode. They really want to get involved with a show. Obviously, the debate is raging on this one. I've just read an article on it today, but we do see a shift into weekly with the new platforms. You can see that clearly here. Amazon have experimented with the release schedule of The Expanse here. You can see Series 1 in gold was released on linear. You can see in the gold there and the demand for it. Then you can see the red line, that was a binge release. So you can see that peak near the start where the binge was released, and then all the episodes at once, and then you can see it gradually come down in what we call our decay curve. But when they had the same series and they dropped season 5, our data found that you could see much more extended interest in it as the episodes dropped. Each one of those dots is an episode drop. So again, different release schedules suit different content, but this is a very clear example of how experimenting could be the way forward. Here, if we can make this slide a bit bigger as well, please. Here are the consumption patterns for the top titles in APAC that we pulled for this session for you. So you can see red is piracy, and you can see the other categories there. Now, the ones I want to point out, Peppa Pig, Paw Patrol, and SpongeBob, they all have heavy social video focus in our buckets of data because they're available on social video for advertising support and also for free. The worldwide smashes here tend to have a more level breakout of buckets. So the better the mix, the higher the global kind of smashness of the show in general. You're seeing that for WandaVision, Stranger Things, The Crown, Attack on Titan. And also worth pointing out here is the research. The Marvel universe, you can see people heavily researching here. The real life shows like The Crown and One Piece, which is a Japanese anime moving into theatrical. And also high social, you can see My Hero Academia, Monday Night Raw, the WWE. So the point is every single show has very different ways of consumption. And that's what we track here at Parrot. And if you're trying to get these results down, you don't have to, because you can have this deck afterwards. It's cleared for distribution to the attendees. Okay, but why is piracy so important to track? Well, this is the reason why, and this is why we help our companies. You can see here a single show, show A, which was launched in Great Britain and the USA, and you can see the breakdown. You see the research there, you see the social media, and you see the piracy levels about 53% and a little higher in the UK on 66%. But look at the piracy rates for where it wasn't released day and date. It's very clear that there's more piracy when you haven't released it in a territory yet. You can argue, and we do argue quite frequently, that the gap between that 66% and where those other bars are is under monetization that could be filled in if the availability windows were brought down. Now, we know that some pirates are unwitting and some pirates are unwilling. This is about helping them understand and helping companies understand this is an opportunity here. And that's what we do at Parrot. Because what we do with piracy data is we look at affinity. So we look at how people consume shows. So if you watch this show, you're likely to consume this show, is how recommendation engines work. Not us, we're empirical. We know that if someone on an anonymous endpoint pirates a certain show, we know exactly what they pirate next. So we're able to draw editorial content trails through how people consume content. Example, and that hasn't come out too well on the slide, but I will talk through it. You're seeing The Witcher on the left-hand side here. 40% of the top 25 titles pirated alongside The Witcher were also on Netflix. That means we saw it as a high retention title. Those are the titles that you want on your squeeze credits. Those are the titles you want to tell your existing subscribers about on emails. When we ran this, which was last year, the morning show, 4 out of 25, you could argue that Apple will be unhappy with that. You could argue they'll be happy with that because the job is to keep people on their service and keep the hardware machine rolling. Now, what we did see when The Mandalorian was launched, and I'm sorry to pick on The Mandalorian, and this has changed now, the Marvel machine has kicked into gear, 0 out of the top 25 shows that were pirated alongside The Mandalorian were also on the Disney Plus platform, which means that that show was a pile driver for acquisition, maybe not as strong for retention until they got some more adult originals going. What we do with this information is we can look at catalog overlap against demand, and we can map out what a piece of content does for a service. So you can see here in the red that 000 and work in progress. You can launch them on your service, but your marketing machine is going to have to work hard because the demand is fairly low and the retention rate is fairly low. The ones in green, they're high retention and they're strong demand. The Third Day, The Outsider, Gangs of London, I'm pretty sure this was Sky Atlantic's content we were looking at for this analysis. So you can see those are the ones that you want to talk about to your existing subscribers, whereas Avenue 5 and the unreleased Halo, they're the ones that we picked out as subscriber acquisition drivers. So not all content is equal. Some is better than others at retention, and some is better than others at acquisition. And that's what our data uses, our piracy data, to figure out. So how much demand is there and how does it impact index in APAC? You can see here a world map I've done for you. When you combine all our billions of signals that we receive across a year and see where all the demand for TV shows is coming from, this is how it breaks down. So 4.5% is the highest from the US. Now that may seem low, but remember, we're talking about the whole world demanding television. So 5% of that coming from one country actually isn't too shabby at all. And you can see the rest on this, this list. There may be some surprises. Thank you. If you isolate APAC, this is how our signals break down for this region. So you have Australia, 14.5%, which is pretty high. India at 13%, China at 13%, and you can see the list going down there. So remember, that's the breakdown. When we take all of our demand signals from a certain region, that is where they are. Now, why is this important? Because if you're an Australian and you're making content just for Australia, that's great, but you're missing out on potentially 85% of APAC if you're keeping it in the country. And that's why we help companies think about travelability, getting an original show and being able to take it worldwide, which is, of course, is where the revenue comes from. So let's look at genres quickly. When we look at the overall demand for content genres worldwide and then compare to APAC, you can see here that when you look at the global average demand, you have about 40% drama, but you have about 43% drama in APAC. So drama over indexes as a genre in APAC, and we can also see that animation shows an over index here, and you'll see what drives that on the next slide. So this is where I broke down for you and looked at each major country within APAC. Forgive me if I haven't included yours. So you can see the legend on the left. Remember, you will get a copy of these slides. The key points: Malaysia over indexes for kids content. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And we see that, and we've confirmed that with Malaysian clients. Australia over indexes for reality. Where I'm sitting right now, there's a lot of reality TV in this country, and it performs extremely well. China, interestingly enough, over indexes for documentary. Now, make of that as you will, but we definitely see a strong over index in factual documentaries in China, in the Chinese territory. And the Philippines over indexes for action and adventure. Now, how does this work when you look at piracy data? Well, what we can look at, and we look at with a client, is if you can identify content that is being pirated that you haven't got on your platform, if you can identify it and put it in genre and put it in subgenre, you're able to think about bringing some of that onto your platform and therefore reducing the level of piracy, taking out the unwilling and the unwitting and bringing them onto your platform. Again, that is a key use of our piracy information. Let's go one back. So you can see here, when we've looked at subgenres, it's very clear. You can see how much demand swings around from country to country. Japan, Japanese animation. They're absolutely hugely strong on Japanese animation, but you can see the difference when you look at a country like India. I'll let you have a look at that when you get the deck. Finally, what else do we use demand data for? This is how we help companies figure out the key question in streaming, which is supply versus demand. You're able to see in the blue section here where we've got high supply, so a high number of shows being released, but also high demand. So you see that those shows have high supply and high demand. So keep producing them, they cut through, they generate demand, but they're difficult to break through. You need a good marketing machine to break them through. The really interesting ones that we help clients with using our piracy data is potential. These are the ones with low supply, but above average demand. So if you're thinking of producing a superhero series and targeting it for APAC, you're probably in a good space. That looks like it would cut through. And you can see an underperforming section and what we call a saturated section there. Just quickly, we also look at the genre mix when you trade off between business models. So what content suits business models better? Well, you can see on this chart here, reality shows work better for brand integration and ad sales, so they work better on AVODs. Drama is fairly split, where children and documentaries titles definitely work better for subscriber acquisition and retention, and we do a lot of research on that. And just finally, we drew up a travelability map for you. When you take all the content from countries and look at where it travels to best around the world, and we can benchmark the home country to the rest of the world, you can see here how that maps out. You can clearly see Japan flying high in the top right category there, Australia as well, and then there's a few other countries in APAC that are coming up. So I hope that gives you an idea of how we use our data. So piracy, absolutely, it's a scourge, we completely agree, but there definitely are some uses for it for companies that are trying to figure out their strategy. If you'd like to know more, drop me a line. I hope that's given you a view on how you can take a bad thing and how you can potentially turn it to your advantage in the wonderful industry that we are in. It's been my pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for the valuable insight and data shared. If you have any questions for our speakers, please do type them in the Q&A box. So adding on to what we have just heard from Sunil and Steve, we'll now dive deeper into understanding how each of these media companies are building growth for their video-on-demand business while meeting consumers' demand, and what more can be done to secure video content against pirates. Please join me and welcome Louis Boswell, CEO of AVIA, and his panelists. Over to you, Louis.